Good morning. There's a there's a word in Tibetan that we we made a translation, but I'm not sure how well the idea comes across. The word is pagyu, and the translation would be we use the term conscientiousness, which in a few words it makes reference to our ability or this state of consciousness where we're aware of what we already know. The lack of conscientiousness is when there are things that we know. And if anyone asked us about it, we would be able to answer. But we don't have this awareness of our actions, our interactions. We don't take that into consideration. It's not part of our way of being, our view of how we are. A classic example would be the conscientiousness of our own death. If you asked anyone if they're going to die or not, the answer would be yes. When? We don't know, right? But now, when we wake up in the morning and during the day, as we do what we do, are we aware of this fact that we are going to die? No, I mean, we are lacking this conscientiousness, and there are thousands of things, different things that we know, but are not part of our daily actions. This lack of conscientiousness brings us to act in an automatic way. It, it makes us act as a kind of reaction. We react to what happens instead of acting with awareness. And this is a key point because when we work on the base of reaction, number one, we're strongly influenced by the context in which we find ourselves, in the people that we interact with, and our habits of the past. Once I read something, I don't know how true it is, but it really can make us think. It said that 99% of our thoughts are repetitions of previous thoughts. And I think observing it doesn't seem that wrong. And so what happens is we work mostly on this basis of habit, the habits that are already created, and at the same time we react react based on the situations that we find ourselves in, the world around me. As Buddha Shakyamuni said, I am my own protector, I am my protector, I am my own enemy. And fortunately, our tendency is to act in the opposite way. I'm not my own protector. And so if I need to be well, it depends on something outside of me. And I'm not my own enemy either, because if I'm not well, it's someone else's fault or the fault of something else. And we spend our lives trying to avoid problems, avoiding things we don't like, and trying to get things we do like. And we stay on a superficial level, the level of sensation. How much importance do we give to sensation? So much. Actually, really, when Buddha Shakyamuni described a being, I mean, what is a person made up of, he talked about the five aggregates. The five aggregates, there's the aggregate of form, which is the body, and then there's the aggregate of of consciousness, mind stream, and then he added three more: the aggregate of feeling or sensation, and the aggregate of discernment, and the aggregate of the aggregate of compositional factors. These are the various mental factors that make us up. But discernment and sensation, those are also mental factors. So why couldn't he just say body, form, mind, and then the mind can be divided into this flow of thoughts that perceive external objects, and then the various characteristics that make up those thoughts, attraction, aversion, and many other things that are there within. Why didn't he do that? Instead, he wanted to get emphasis to these two of discernment and sensation, is because the main causes of suffering and conflict on a great level is this attachment to sensation and the attachment that we have to discernment, attachment to feeling, to sensation. I mean, how many things do we do to avoid a negative sensation, an unpleasant sensation, or get a positive, pleasant sensation? How many of our choices are based on that? So many, so many. And so there's also here, I mean, there are things that we want, we want a pleasant sensation, but are we worried about having, are we worried about having pleasant sensations in short term or mid and long term? Mostly it's short term. And also, do we want to avoid the immediate suffering, or are we thinking about mid and long term? There too, we're looking at short term, and here I think we have two of the greatest challenges in our lives. I didn't want to talk about this today, but here we are. There are two challenges that are very important in our life. This challenge to abandon what is pleasurable, but that is not good for us. Things that first impact, they give us a pleasurable sensation, but mid and long term, they're bad for us. So abandoning those things is really not easy. It's a great challenge. And the other challenge is to cultivate what is upon first impact displeasurable, this is unpleasant, but mid and long term is beneficial. A classic example is a diet. I mean, there are certain things we don't like to eat but are good for us. Instead, there are things that we know are bad for us, but we like to eat them. I mean, just eat what is good for you. Instead, when that poison is tasty, we are so attached to this sensation, the feeling, and the immediate result of pleasure that we can't even stop eating poison, knowing that it's poison. So here we really need this clarity, understanding that these are two important challenges that, and it's not the word to fight is, that's not the right word, but we need to work on this. And the more we're able avoid avoid the things that we know are not good for us, and this is not a sacrifice. We're not sacrificing anything. We're taking care of ourselves by doing this. When I stop eating the poison, is it a sacrifice or is it something positive I'm doing for myself? It's good, even if it's tiresome, if it requires effort. So having this conscientiousness that this is good for me and I need to cultivate this, and this is bad for me and I need to avoid this, and that we are not made of just what happens in our immediate. We need to think also about mid and long term, and that'll help us cultivate this conscientiousness of doing what's good for us and avoiding what's bad for us. But because we do things that are bad for us and they show up mid and long term, sooner or later that mid and long term is going to show up. We're going to face that. So living a healthy lifestyle requires effort in that immediate in this moment. Maybe it's easier to eat badly, but after 10 years time, after 15 years time, after whatever time it needs, then we need to pay that bill of having eaten badly. And then I need to put effort into avoiding a suffering that I myself created. So our objective is to create a balance where we receive the results of we re, we we're able to maintain a state of equilibrium, of balance, where we live the results of having made positive choices and we continue to make more positive choices, create this kind of balance. But our tendency, as we've said before, is to try to avoid suffering and we look for pleasure. And given that we are so attached to sensation, it's important also to look further ahead, not just in this immediate moment. I want to have Tomorrow I want to avoid suffering. Tomorrow I want to have pleasant sensations. I need to work on that today. Someone might say, well, who's thinking about today? Today is already gone because today is the result of yesterday, and yesterday we've already lived. What we're living in this present moment is the result of our choices that we've made in the past and we've already made. So we're living a cycle that has already begun. And that seed was planted, it was watered, and it has flowered. It is now. We need to live it in the best way possible. It's like saying I have a debt and I don't like having debts. We need to pay, yes, but is it better to is it is it better to pay off that debt fully or take out another loan to pay off that debt? Our tendency, our tendency is to do that. Like, I have a debt, I don't want to have this debt, and so I do something else to take out this loan so I can pay that debt. But then I'm going to have to pay that debt further along. And this law of karma sometimes it's just imagine a credit card, for example. Lama used the example of the telephone bill. But let's imagine a credit card. Imagine a credit card that has a specific characteristic. It's unlimited purchases, and the bill comes, and we don't know when it's going to come. And when it comes, and you don't have the list of everything that you have purchased. So maybe you buy something today, but you'll have to pay it in 5 years' time or 20 years' time. What would happen? What happens when that bill comes? But you say, I didn't spend anything this month, but you get a bill of 20,000. You say, well, I didn't buy anything this month. No, every small purchase was marked. And it's crazy when we live a result of something and we're not able to connect it with the cause, we have this strong feeling of injustice, Happened to me once. I was here in Albagnano, and at a certain point, I don't remember. I needed to update my car insurance, and they told me the the class has gone down. You have to pay more. And I asked why, and he said, "Well, you had an accident." I said, "What? I never had an accident." Yes, yes, yes. I said, "No." And I started thinking, you see, I often loan my car. Someone had an accident and they didn't even tell me. And they said, no, you, I asked for a copy of, the declaration of the accident, and they said yes. And I said, please show me. And they showed me my signature, and I thought they forged my signature. Who is this behind all of this? And then I start reading the details of the accident, and I remember it was here at night. I was parked right here between the center and the temple. There was a fog. It was nighttime. I needed to leave very early for a trip. I I went in reverse, and I didn't realize that there was a car behind me, and so to the side actually, and I um, I hit that car. So I called the center, and I said, "There's probably a guest sleeping at this center, um, and there's someone that's sleeping at the center. You know, when they wake up, they'll see their car has been hit. You can tell them that it was Lama that hit their car." So I left everything filled out. So I left the forms, and then and the people at the center, they filled it out. And so when I higher bill came, I didn't remember it, but it happened. So we don't know when this bill comes. We don't know when. We don't know what it's for. And it comes as if it's a kind of injustice. Or sometimes we see it as an injustice, or sometimes we think that it as we think, for example, what happens if you park in the wrong spot and then the policeman comes to give you a ticket? I mean, people get upset with people get upset with the policeman, you know. But it's not they're giving you the ticket because you're parking in the wrong place, not because they're evil. No, you should be upset with yourself that you've parked in the wrong spot and not with the one who's giving you writing out the ticket. Or if someone brings you bad news, you know, you can't get upset with the person who is the bearer of bad news. So when we live situations that are unpleasant, sometimes we try to blame the context. We blame the condition, the so-called condition, this moment that it is manifesting. Like I put water and that sprouts a plant, and I think, I don't like that plant. Well, is that the fault of the water or of the seed? It's the seed. I mean, the water is is there nourishing many other plants as well. It's necessary for the sprout, but it's not the cause. So when we talk about karma, one characteristic is when we do something physically, verbally, mentally, we are enacting a process of transformation, and sooner or later, the results will manifest. It's not necessarily immediate, but when the results come, we're not able to connect. So we can talk about two types of ignorance as the principal cause of suffering. One is the ignorance of not seeing, ignorance understood as not seeing. In that moment of cause, we don't know what the results will be, and the moment of the result, we're not able to understand what the causes were. This is part of our way of being, the way we are. So, a very important point is when we have results, we should not try to blame others and try to not create new debts, trying to pay the previous ones. Instead, try to interact in a healthy way. When we live a moment of difficulty, it's fundamental to not be overwhelmed or not overwhelmed by negative feelings. I find it a little hilarious in some way. When someone acts aggressively towards us, for example, do we think it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? And we think it's wrong, right? So it's wrong that you act with aggression towards me. And what's the reaction that we have towards the aggression of others? Are we peaceful, patient? We try to open ourselves up to this person, um, trying to understand why he's acted like that. No, what's normally our reaction is that we are aggressive too. And the crazy thing is that we justify our aggression with by the aggression of the other. You shouldn't be aggressive, but given that you are, I'm going to be aggressive too. It's crazy. I mean, it's really crazy to think like that. Because if I think that it's wrong and it's not good to be aggressive, the last thing I should do is to act in the same way. Because otherwise, I mean, what difference is there between me and the other in that moment? My behavior and the behavior of the other in that moment? Otherwise, it seems like, fights between children, and um, they start fighting, and then the mother comes and says, "Stop fighting," and one of the children says, "Well, he started." Well, it doesn't matter who started. I mean, it's a behavior that is not beneficial. It's bad for oneself. It's bad for others, and who started is not important, because if you spit in my eye and I spit in your eye, then we're speaking the same language. We're doing the same thing, have the same behavior. And one aspect of maturity is being able, in front of a situation of difficulty, to not be the victim, at least, which is a lot already, stay in a neutral state. And then after, um, act with more awareness. And getting back to the point, let's do a rewind, because I wanted to talk about something different today, actually. This It's the fact that with conscientiousness, also there's also this aspect of not living life as a mere reaction to what happens. Instead, it's important to have clarity and to maintain this clarity. I mean, even before having conscientiousness, one needs to have that clarity and be able to form that clarity and then maintain that clarity. This clarity is about where I'm going. What do I want? And having this clarity is one of the most important things ever. It's one fundamental first step, and we can't do without. Because if we don't have clarity about where we want to go and who I want to be, what I'm doing, if we don't have this clarity, we live just reacting, and we go on like this. And it's for this reason too, as Atisha said in the garland of the jeweled garland of the Bodhisattva, he says there are two actions. There's one at the beginning and there's one at the end. Anything that we do, it's important at the beginning to generate the motivation. Or rather, we need to remember why we're doing what we're doing. Otherwise, the danger, we do things at a certain point, it becomes a habit at a certain point, doing that thing is, I have to do that thing because we have to do that thing, so we forget why we're doing it. Also, with spiritual practice, it's like this. In in the monasteries, at least in the monastery where I studied at Sera, there's a term that was used in a kind of sarcastic way that I personally don't like it that much, but it 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 makes sense. When something is when something is done badly, for example, you go and you clean a room, but you clean it quickly in a kind of automatic way without awareness, without really seeing where it's dirty. So a job done without presence, without one's head. They say, to say that it's done badly, they say, oh, that work was done for the benefit of all sentient beings. So you've done it badly, oh, and so you've done it for the benefit of all sentient beings. Why? Because in one of the most important verses that we recite at the beginning of any meditation, any teachings or practice, we say, in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment with the practice of generosity and the other perfections. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. And it's like making fun of ourselves to say, oh, you repeat it every day, but you don't think it. It's just it's automatic. Oh, for the benefit of all sentient beings, but I'm thinking about lunch or who knows what else. You don't really feel it. So I don't know who or when they started using this term in a kind of sarcastic way of saying it, which is kind of a self-criticism. But we shouldn't be like that. We should be careful with our motivation and not do things just automatically. And even within spiritual practice, there's something at the beginning, and there's a reason, and maybe even with along our spiritual practice, that reason for doing the reason for doing something can be to be a good Buddhist. Well, who cares about being a good Buddhist? What's important is to transform our mind in a virtuous way, to develop more stability, joy, love, patience, to have a conduct that matches our worldview. This is what our practice should be about. Our motivation should be. We need to remember it, and this is why we generate the motivation at the beginning. And when we finish, what do? We dedicate. So there's the motivation at the beginning, and at the end there's the dedication, and there's the probability. When we generate the motivation, we connect with that objective, and then maybe we lose it during our practice, and with the dedication we renew that. But it's important to maintain that awareness throughout. It's fundamental for us. And because it's normal and has always been like this, we forget the things that we already know. Once we're able to generate a good motivation, and after a while, it's normal, we lose that motivation. And that's why there's this fundamental exercise of generating the motivation. And it should be repeated again and again. To generate our motivation, our the tools we use are words, but we need to be careful. Be careful to avoid that these words become empty, because this is also a danger. At the beginning, these motivational verses that help us direct our mind, it can happen that we repeat those words so often that they no longer touch our heart. This happens. This can happen. To do all of this, the fundamental point at the beginning is to have clarity with ourselves, what we want. And they try to be very essential, just go right to the point here. There are two main types of motivation that are possible. When we look at all the reasons or motivations that are possible, they can be summarized in two main in two main categories. There's an important crossroads. The first can be for a motivation that is spiritual or mundane, and what distinguishes the mundane from the spiritual. If the motivation that pushes us to do that thing is directed towards that which transcends this life, it's spiritual. For example, our body. Does our body go beyond this life? No. Our name, our image, our power or pleasure, momentary pleasure, knowledge, recognition, our family also. Connections that we create on a deeper level transcend this life. But the relationships as we know them, do they transcend this life? No. So what transcends this life? First, let's look first what transcends this present moment before looking at a lifetime. Let's imagine that we're able to have a long life and we imagine ourselves as old people, 90 plus years. Uh, the knowledge that we have, does it remain the same or little by little do we lose it? Our memory, normally, we lose it a little bit. Is the body the same? Our body at 90 will be the same as it is now? No. What are the things that we can cultivate today that we know we will have also as an older person? Can someone assure us that the money that we set aside today that we will still have it then? No. The relationships that we have, the human relationships that we have today, will we have them then? We're not sure. If we take good care of our health today, are we sure we'll be healthy then? No. Me, for example, I don't want to be tragic, but I've seen people who've taken care of their health their entire life and then had a stroke. We just don't know. But generally, the main things that we can cultivate today that will be beneficial for us in the future are whether I grow old, healthy or not, rich or poor, in company or alone, patience will be there to help me. Stability will help me. Gratitude will help me, for example. And I see people who have cultivated certain characteristics in their life, the older they get, the more those characteristics become present and important in their lives. In the positive way and also in a negative way. The more someone complains about something, the more someone will become a huge complainer and things won't go well, etc., etc. Then we have this stereotype of old people, the grandparents, that it's kind of it's a stereotype. Of, we have this old person. This is also a stereotype of the old wise person who is very patient, has seen everything, is very wise. Nothing is a taboo anymore. And on the other side, on the other extreme that we have the old person who is is grumpy and is doesn't have any patience, is fully concentrated only on himself. But who do we want to be? How do we want to get old? Do we want to be a grumpy old person where no one wants to be close to us because they complain about everything, is against everyone? And maybe you have to be close to that person because they're in that category of, okay, mm, I have to be close to this person because this is my uncle, this is my aunt, this is my parent. And then you get into that category of obligation. Or do we want to be the old person where we try to be a reference point, where we try to um, contribute something to others, to be stable? Do we want to be wise? Our question is, I mean, what kind of old person within are we cultivating? I mean, because what we do today is what we're going to see in the future. It would be wonderful if if the if we could just use up those negative habits at a certain point, then we don't do it anymore. We're born complainers, and we only have a certain number of complaints, and then when those are finished, we don't complain anymore. No, it's the opposite. The more I complain, the more I will complain. We're made up of we're made up of habits like a muscle, and the more we do that, the stronger those habits become, even from a neuroscience point of view. When you look at how our brain is made, the the more we use an aspect of our brain, the more that aspect strengthens. And the less we use those aspects of the brain, the weaker they become. Just look, I don't know, in your daily life, how many of you actually do math without calculator? I happened to me recently. I needed to make a very simple calculation, and I needed my calculator, and I thought, what has happened to me? I mean, simply, if we don't use a part of our brain, that part of the brain weakens and we lose it. But the more we use a part of our brain, like the more I complain, for example, the more used to complaining I become. So, in a if it's very easy to see, that that which transcends this present moment helps us understand what transcends this lifetime, because what we bring from life to life are they're mostly the imprints of our deeper experiences, our our habits of body, speech, and mind on a deeper level. So what becomes a deep habit within, that's what we take for life to life. So if I do something to cultivate joy, to face impatience, to develop more patience, to develop more peace, more gratitude, more awareness, etc. These are spiritual practices because these are characteristics that transcend this life. If we use a term that's been wrongly used, um, you know, we can say that when someone gets angry or complains, that's also spiritual because that also transcends this life. But it's the kind of spiritual that we don't want. It's the one that hurts us, but that also transcends this life. So in this motivation, why do I do what I do? Why am I doing this thing? Because I want to resolve something in the immediate present or future, or do I want to cultivate something that will be able to uphold a state of well-being mid and long term? And that changes the perspective completely, because one thing is resolving immediate problems, something else is this awareness of how I'm transforming myself, how I'm shaping, how I'm being shaped, how I'm shaping myself, uh, given the situations I live. So I live today, for example, what motivation do I have? Why do I do what I do? I want to cultivate more patience. I deeply desire to develop more love. So today I'm going to use this day to develop more patience. And then someone comes, and it's a difficult situation, and someone is there really disturbing, and we think how wonderful I have this opportunity, because that I mean, these problems, they come, they go, but what transforms me, it it continues. I need to take care of that. And if we're talking about pa- um, developing patience, we can't develop patience without an object of anger. It's easy to be patient when everything is fine. Even if I've seen people also be impatient in times great calm. I've seen that impatience, for example, has a physical component to it. I remember there was someone very close to me many years ago, and there was the situation, and I was next to this person, or close to this person for many years, and there was a kind of crescendo. This person was fine, and then that person started to become a little bit more nervous, a little bit more nervous, a little bit more nervous, and then would just explode. And once we were in a context, I mean, there was everything was fine, no reason to be upset. Really, everything was wonderful. There was no tangible reason to say that something was wrong, but I was watching and I could see that as time went by, this tension was coming out. This person was looking for something to to point, something to point the finger on. We were at the seaside. It was a very beautiful context. And then we just needed to get to the check-in of a hotel, and then the check-in at the airport, where at the counter they said we had too many kilos. Our luggage was too heavy, and I remember this scene. It was explosion. I mean, what was actually happening was not really the reason. It was all that tension that had been accumulated. And as soon as this person found a reason, on which to project all of that aggression, it was a total explosion. So, so often, so to practice patience, we need an object of anger, but sometimes that object of anger is ourselves. So we need to recognize also the tension that grows within. So, so try to recognize this physical tension that comes on an emotional level or on a sensational level, but I don't need to project it onto something. I can use other tools to release this tension without projecting it onto someone and then entering into conflict with that person, because it happens to me sometimes. There are days where I feel a kind of tension, and I think, oh, there's a kind of tension. Why? Yeah, I don't know. What do I know? Really, I don't know. And so what I try to do is, okay, I'm aware that I feel this tension. I'll put extra effort into not projecting that onto anything or anyone, because that will generate conflict, that will be harmful. So I try to do things maintaining this awareness of releasing this tension. Maybe I do a specific meditational practice or recite certain mantras or I go walking in the woods. I do something to release that built up tension, because often what we feel is not necessarily caused by something that we're actually presently living. There was a study that was done. It was very nice. It's by this English researcher who studied human behavior, and in one research, she said that humans mostly they don't know how to judge their own feelings of what they're living, and she made a lot of research on this, and what made her reflect on this, on herself and for others, once she was working late at the lab, and at a certain point, her co-researcher, her co-worker, said, "Let's just set the work aside. Let's go have a drink. Let's go to the pub." And she thought, "Well, I don't really like him that much, but okay, let's go." And when she got there, she had a beer, and then she had a second beer. At a certain point, she started feeling this like heat coming up from her body, a little bit strange. And she was asking herself, do I like him? Do I like him on an unconscious level? And then she had another beer. And at the end, she, at the end of the evening, they decided that they would see each other again, and then she left. She left him, and she thought, okay, we'll have another date. And when she got home, she saw that she had a fever. She was at the beginning of a flu, and then actually some kind of intestinal flu was coming on, and and had it been another context, she would have just taken her temperature. But in that context, she attributed a different meaning. And so what she explained and what the teachings say, we try to understand what we feel through the present context, when often has nothing to do with what we're presently living. So I feel something. I look around. Why am I feeling like this? And I need to find a reason. When the reason has a hormonal component, astrological component, it's sometimes there's a physical memory that comes depending on what we're living, or depending on on the season. In the springtime, our liver is weaker. I mean, there's so many things that influence how we are feeling. There's not one reason, but not seeing all of these things together, we look around and we look for the one to blame. And when we find the one to blame, we attack that person or thing, and we just create conflict. So when we recognize that there's tension, it's important to not to point our finger, because there are too many causes. Obviously, with more and more awareness of our own body, our own dynamics, this helps a lot. But when we feel tension, well, we practice patience. We don't react with aggression in front of our so-called object of anger. Um, could be hormones or moments, astrological moments that influence us without our knowing, or situations that are nothing, but they take us to an emotional memory of something that we lived poorly in the past. So when we feel these tensions, we try not to nourish the conflict, but to break down that tension. But if my objective is to practice patience because I want to be a joyous, patient, a balanced person, and I don't want to be overwhelmed by anger anymore, and I want to be an old patient person, and I don't want to be reborn as a child who has this predisposition for anger. Because when we see a newborn, for example, a newborn has his character, has the predispositions already clear. I saw now in this, now that I had these puppies at home, even for dogs, 6 puppies, and each one with a different character. One more arrogant, one weaker. I mean, in just a short amount of time, you're able to see the different personalities. One of my great challenges, um, the, I have a great challenge with now. It's better, but one of my great challenges is my laziness, and I've said to myself, I don't want to be reborn lazy, so I need to overcome my laziness before dying, not on a superficial level, but on a deeper level. And this is what we need to do on everything. Why do I do this? Uh, we say, oh, generally speaking, because I want to get out of samsara, which could mean a lot or it could mean very little if we don't really deeply understand and reflect on it. So I like to say better to fall in love with inner peace. So, to do that, I need to overcome anger, jealousy, envy, anxiety, and fear. I need to develop deeply patience, joy, stability, gratitude, love, compassion, wisdom, etc. And this is my main objective. And this is why I do this instead of something else. And when we're able to connect with this, this allows us to go to a higher, deeper motivation where we see others around us, and we say, why do I do this? Because I want to help every person be better. But how can I help you, to be better off if I myself am in such a bad state? If how can I help you be less nervous if I'm always angry? So I develop my own qualities so that then to their maximum level, so then I can help others do the same to get out of their own suffering. So let's give clarity to why we do what we do. And I invite you just to generate your motivation, not necessarily using a pre-established form, which is fine, but go beyond, go into the specifics of why you do what you do. Here, one directs to, one directs one's own specific motivation to not fall into the trap of just doing things automatically. And then you can set my motivation for the week, for example. We've talked about this many times, and without getting into details. For example, we have this tendency of getting bored. So to not feel bored, you can break up the week, the 7 days of the week, and we dedicate each day to something different. So there's one day dedicated to generosity, like Monday, generosity, Tuesday, morality, Wednesday, patience, Thursday, enthusiastic effort, Friday, concentration, Saturday, wisdom, and Sunday we rest. And then we pick that up again the following Monday. But if you generate the awareness, today I want to dedicate this day to this, to generosity. I want to give materially. I want to give love. I want to give protection, to give the Dharma. Today I want to offer to the world and I want to train in that. This is my motivation. Today I want to dedicate myself to morality, so I'm going to keep my commitments well. I'm going to avoid what is harmful and cultivate what's beneficial. I want to dedicate myself to patience. I shouldn't act mentally, verbally, or physically with aggression towards what disturbs me. I want to also dedicate myself, if my motivation is enthusiastic, effort. So I put effort into what is difficult but is beneficial. Or if I want to work on concentration, I put effort into awareness. Another day for wisdom. I try to interact with reality in a coherent way, see what is impermanent as impermanent, what is subjective as subjective. And then gradually we generate this, we give a direction to what we do in our lives. And at the end, we dedicate. So there are two actions, one at the beginning and one at the end. And let's try in this way to not just do things in an automatic way. If we're able to do this well, it's very interesting. At the end, what we do on a practical level becomes important. And I mean, what we actually do is not that important, but how we do it becomes important. Years ago, I used to go from Albagnano to Milan very often. I had an old Peugeot, and there was no telepass, so I would stop at the toll gate, and every time I would try to connect myself with the people who were there. And I would think, how could you transform this type of job that is you see the person, you take the money, you give back change, you take money, you give change. And I was thinking about it. For example, if someone there, if every person who comes, you generate a virtuous thought towards that person for everyone who passes, what is that person cultivating? The toll worker is cultivating love. That's just one example. And very often, what's important is not the actual job we do, but how we do it. Even one master in Tibet, one of the most important, well-known, it was a disciple of Khyentse Rinpoche. At a certain point, he left Tibet after everything that happened. He ended up in Germany. He got married, and he ended up working in a working in a factory. What he was actually doing, I don't know, but he he had his practice. And what he was doing wasn't important, but how he was doing it, he was continuing to transform him, shape himself. So if we have more awareness about this, then we find freedom because we are no longer dependent on on the context in which we live. And then we have more freedom to choose. And this is all for today. It's time for our dedications.
Drove munsela tatu ne gyur chi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sada lamge yun dorje change kopa nyur tob sho nimo dele tsindele nime kuyan dele kshin Nintzen takto delekpe koncho sumke chingi lob koncho sumke ngodrubotsol koncho sumke trashisho
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
at dawn or dusk, at night or midday. May the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and spring all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Trishitele. Have a very nice day, everyone.
E poi, quando sono
And
stato in America
when I
a
was in
parte
the United States,
Khyentse Rinpoche, ho
to
portato
Khyentse
un
Rinpoche,
piccolo,
I
una piccola
brought
protezione,
us
un filo benedetto da lui
a
per tutti i
blessed
non aver ricevuto.
protection from him. For those of you who haven't received it yet, please come today to get it.